Scholar IT Solutions is a balanced staffing company developed by a group of professionals with an experience of over 18+ years in staffing solutions. With years of quality and committed high-end application development and staffing experience, we have become experts at delivering the right fit, the first time. We will be glad to be your last stop and provide you with the perfect solution to your requirements. Follow Scholar IT Solutions LinkedIn page. For more updates, follow our social media pages.
And every subtask is called as a procedure. That is nothing but a function. In object-oriented programming also, the task to be done is divided into subtasks like subtask 1, subtask 2, subtask 3, and every subtask is called as a class. In procedure-oriented programming, the subtask is called as a procedure. In object-oriented programming, the subtask is called as a class. So what is a class? Before understanding that, we have to see one more thing. See, actually, why we have to know what is object-oriented programming in the context of Python? Is there any relation between Python and object-oriented programming? If yes, what is the relation? Actually, C language is not object-oriented. C language is not object-oriented. Java is object-oriented. .NET is object-oriented. Python is object-oriented. How can we decide whether a language is object-oriented or not? What is the criteria? See, in any language, if we write the code using classes and objects, in any language, if we write the code or programs in classes and objects or using classes and objects, we can call that language as object-oriented language. In Java, we will write the code using classes and objects. So we can call Java as object-oriented. In .NET also, we will write the code using classes and objects. So we can call .NET as object-oriented. In C language, there is no concept of class or object. So C is not object-oriented. There is no class or object concept in C language. So C is not object-oriented. In Python also, we can write the code using classes and objects. So we can call Python also as an object-oriented language. So how can we decide whether a language is object-oriented or not? If we are able to write the code using classes and objects in that language, then we can call that language as object-oriented. In Python also, we will be able to write the code using classes and objects. So we can call Python as object-oriented language. But from the beginning, I'm saying writing the code using classes, objects, right? But what is a class? What is an object? That is an obvious question in our mind. Let's understand the class and object. A very simple definition. Class is a collection of variables and functions. Class is a collection of variables and functions. Variables, attributes, properties, in any way we can call. Functions, methods, behaviors, in any way we can call. So, class is a collection of what and what? Variables and functions. For example, we can call student as a class. So what are the variables or what are the properties of the student means? Number, name, age, gender, city, etc. What are the functions or what are the reusable things for the student means? Join, reading, writing, listening. So student is a class with these as variables and these as functions. So what is a class? Very simply speaking, class is nothing but a collection of variables and functions. Then what is an object? Any real world entity is called as an object. It can represent a person, a bank account, or anything. So actually the point is, let's say I had taken an object called as yes1. I had taken an object called as yes1. So in this yes1 object, I am storing the data of the first student. In the yes1 object, I am storing the data of the first student. like SNO equal to student number is 11, S name is equal to John, and then SH equal to 23. In the S1 object, I am storing the data of the first student. In the same S1 object, I am storing the data of the second student also. So the second student information is number is 12, name is Peter, and age is 25. So what is going to happen now? If I store the data of the second student also in the first object, then what happened? The first student information is lost. It is overwritten, right? So what we have to remember, in one object, we have to store the data of one particular entity. So in the S1 object, I will store the information regarding John. In the S1 object, we will be storing the information regarding John. So SNO equal to 11, S name is equal to John, SH equal to 23. In the S2 object, we will be storing the data of the second student. SNO equal to 12, S name is equal to Peter, SH equal to 25. So what I am saying is, in one object, we have to store the data of one particular entity. You have to store the data of one particular entity. See, if we use S1 object to store the data of the second student also, then what is happening? The first student information will be lost, correct? So in S1 object, I am storing the data of John. In S2 object, I am storing the data of Peter. So one object can represent only one particular entity. One object can hold the data of one particular entity. So here also, in this example, we can call student as a class. We can call student as a class, and we can call student 1 and student 2 as objects. Student 1 and student 2 as objects. See, actually, simply speaking, class is like generalization. Generally, all the entities should have what and what that we have to put in the class. Generally, all the students should have what and what, number, name, age, city, etc. What are the functions generally in a, for a student means join, reading, writing, listening. So class is like generalization. Generally, all the students should have what and what that we will represent here. But one object is going to represent one particular entity. Student 1 object is representing only regarding Anushka. Student 2 object is representing only regarding Akhil. But this class is representing regarding everyone generally. But one object is going to represent regarding one particular entity. Fine. For example, I want to store the details. I want to store the details of 3 products. So what I will do? I will take one class called as product. Generally, all the products should have what and what that I will put here. Product ID should be there. Product name should be there. Product price should be there. Generally, all the products should have what and what that I will put in the product class. So now I will take an object called as product 1. In the product 1 object, I am going to represent the information regarding the first product. So what is that? Product ID equal to 11. Product name equal to pen. Product price equal to 100. Product 2 is an object which is representing the information only regarding the second product, like product ID equal to 12, product name equal to pencil, product price is equal to 50. Product 3 is an object which is going to represent the data only regarding the third product. Product ID equal to 13, product name is equal to book, and product price is equal to 500. So with this example, we can clearly understand that product is a class. With this example, we can clearly understand that product is a class. So what I said, actually, it is like generalization. All the products should have what and what that we have to put here. Product 1 is an object which is representing only regarding pen. Product 2 is an object which is representing only regarding pencil. Product 3 is an object which is representing only regarding book. That means one object can represent only one particular entity. But class is generally going to represent regarding everyone. Generally, all the entities should have what and what that is represented in the class. So hope you all get the difference between the class and object. Let's say I want to store the details of 4 mobiles. So I will take one class. In this, generally all the mobiles should have what and what that I will put. One mobile object is going to represent the data of one particular mobile. M1 object represents the information regarding the first mobile. M2 object is representing the information regarding the second mobile. M3 object is representing the information regarding the third mobile. M4 object is representing the information regarding the fourth mobile. But the class is one which is generally going to represent regarding all the mobiles. All the mobiles should have what and what that we will take in the class. So that is the difference between the class and object. For example, if I want to store the details of 5 employees, then I will take one class and 5 objects. In that one class, all the employees should have what and what, number, name, salary, that I will put. In one object, I will represent the data of one particular employee. So that's why I had written like this. Any real world entity is called as an object. See what I had written. Any real world entity is called as an object. Real world entity. Yes, the student is really existed. That's why I'm maintaining his information. So any real world entity is called as an object. It can represent a person, a bank account, or anything. One object can represent anything. One student, one mobile, one laptop, or whatever. So hope you all understand the difference between class and object. So in Python, what is the syntax to create a class means? Class, class name, variables and functions. So class is a predefined word. It is a keyword. It is given by Python people. Class name is something related to your code, like mobiles, employees, students, laptops, etc. So as per the requirements, whatever the variables and functions you want to put in your class, you have to put. Class is a collection of variables and functions, I told. So this is the way to create the class, and this is the way to put the variables and methods in that. Fine. So now what we will do is, we will see the first program which is written using the classes and objects. So hope you all are aware of the functions concept in Python. So we are using the same thing. Fine. So what is the exact requirement here? I have to store the details of a particular student. I have to store the data of a particular student. So 10 John US, this student information I want to store using classes and objects. Using classes and objects. So class is a collection of variables and functions. Class space class name. So what is the name of the class here? Student. What are the variables in the class? SNO, SName, SAddress. What is the function or method in the class? Display. Class is a collection of variables and functions. Student is a class with 3 variables, namely SNO, SName, SAddress, and display is the function available. Fine. See, we had taken 3 variables, SNO, SName, SAddress variables to store 10 John US respectively. So we have stored 10 in SNO, John into SName, US into SAddress. Fine. Actually, the task is to store and display. I want to display the data of the student, correct? Actually, I want to display 10. That means 10 is there in SNO variable, right? So what I will do? I will write like print SNO. Then what will happen? SNO value is 10, right? 10 will be printed. I want to print John onto the monitor. Then what I have to do? I have to write print SName. I have to print US onto the monitor. Then I have to write print SAddress. Correct? I want to print 10 onto the monitor. So I have to use SNO variable. I want to print John onto the monitor. So I want to use SName variable. I want to use SAddress variable because I want to print US onto the monitor. Similarly, I want to execute this body. I want to execute this function. So that means what I have to do? I have to use or I have to call the display function. So what I'm saying is, I want to use SNO to print 10. I want to use SName to print John. I want to use SAddress to print US. Similarly, I want to use or call the display function because I want this body to get executed. Fine. That means what? I want to use the variables and methods of a class. Correct? Let's say I have a pen and pencil with me. You all people wants to use my pen and pencil. Harika, I am the owner of this pen and pencil. You all people wants to use my pen and pencil. If you want to use my pen and pencil, what you have to do? You have to give a pouch to me. You all people came to me and asked for my pen and pencil. I said, okay, yeah, you can take my pen and pencil, but it should be this pouch and you can pouch. In the same way, you want to use the variables and methods. Who is the owner of pen and pencil? Harika. Who is the owner of variables and methods? Class. See, if you want to use my pen and pencil, you have to give a pouch to me. In the same way, if you want to use the variables and methods of a class, you have to give an object for the class. You have to give an object for the class. So here you can consider object as a pouch. You will understand very soon why we have to create object. The reason we will understand soon. So now what is the requirement? I want to use yes and boy, yes name, yes address display, right? So the owner of this are the student. It's a student. So I have to create object for the student class. When I create object for the class, I will be able to use any method. To create object means object name equal to class name. So what is the syntax to create object for the I'm sorry. So I guess small network issue is there. Yeah. So what I said is I have to create an object to use the variables and methods of a class. So how can I create object means object name equal to class name. Left hand side is the name of the object. Right side is the name of the class for which you are creating this object. So where you have to create object? Outside the class. Outside the class, you have to create object. See,
Yeah, hi Harika. In between the time, your voice is getting disturbed and we are not able to hear you. Sorry.
I guess you're on mute, Harika. So I think I can see your speakers are on. Or she dropped.
sorry for the disturbance. Yeah, so I want to use the variables and methods of a class. For that, I will have to create object. So object equal to class name. This is the syntax to create object. So now, actually, where we have to create object means outside the class. So I guess you are aware of the indentation in Python. See, this is inside the class, right? So I have to create object outside the class. See, this if I put like this is inside, right? If I put like this is outside the class, right? Correct? So now what is the object that I had created? Student1. Student1, see, left side is the object name, right side is the class name, correct? So student1 is the object that I had created. Student1 is the name of the object that I had created. So actually, once the object is created, I am free to use any variable, any method from the class. So what is the syntax to use a variable once the object is created means? See, this is the syntax, object dot variable name. object dot variable name. Again, object dot variable name, object dot method name. So what I told is, if we want to use the variables and methods of a class, then we have to create object for the class. We have to create object for the class. Once the object is created, syntax to use a variable is object dot variable name. Syntax to use a method is object dot method name. Object dot method name. Fine. So here, what is the object that I had created? Student1. Now, accessing the variables individually will be printed. Now, student1 dot snvo object dot variable name. Student1 dot snvo means what? 10. Student1 dot yesname means what? John. Student1 dot yesaddress means what? US. Now, complete data of the student1 is printed. Then student1 dot display. So the display function is called student details is printed. See, this is a repetition operator in Python, right? So this hyphen string is repeated for 50 times, like a heading we will get. The student number is SNO is what? 10 again. The student name is, yes name means what? John. The student address is, yes address means what? US. This student will join will be printed. So definitely you will have a doubt like what is self. We will be explaining what is self in the next 10 minutes very clearly. So first, like we will be revising whatever is discussed till now regarding this program. Class is a collection of variables and functions. In the student class, we have 3 variables and 1 function. In order to use the variables and methods of a class, I have to go out of the class and I have to create object. So syntax to create object is what? Object equal to class name. So student1 is equal to student. So student1 is the object that is created for the student class. Once the object is created, what is the syntax to call a variable? Object dot variable name. Student1 dot snvo, that is 10. Student1 dot yesname, that is John. Student1 dot yesaddress, that is nothing but US. Complete data of the student1 is printed. Student1 dot display, that means what? The display function is called. Student details is printed. Hyphen is printed for 50 times. The student number is, again SNO is 10. S name is John. S address is US. This student will join will also be printed. So what we will do is, we will consider the general structure. We will consider the general structure. See, if we can remember the general structure, then it will be very easy to write the programs using classes and objects. So see, actually, this is the general structure. See, we do have a class. As per the requirements, whatever the variables and functions we have to take, we will be considering. Come out of the class and do only 2 things. Create object for this class and call them, that's it. See, class will be there and we will have variables and functions in that. Once you define the variables and functions as per the requirements, what you have to do? You have to come out of the class. Just create object for this class and call these variables and functions using that object. Outside the class, what you are doing? Object creation and accessing. Only 2 things you are going to do outside the class. Fine. So let's compare the general structure with this program. In this case, in our program, class is nothing but the student. The variables are what? Number, name, and address. What is the method in the class? Display. So to use these variables and methods, we should come out and we have to create object. What is the object created by us? Student1. Student1 is the object created by us. Once the object is created, you can just access. See, accessing means what? Using. See, in Python, dot is called as access operator. Access operator. So to use a variable or to use a method to call a variable or to call a method, we will just make use of this dot. So create object. Yes, the object is created in this line. The object name is student1. Once the object is created, you are free to use everything from the class. And then you can just use that. You can access. See, student1.sn. You are using yes name. You are using yes address. You are using the display function. So this is the general structure. The code related to the object-oriented programming will be looking like this. So there are a lot of things to be discussed regarding this program. But what I will do is, for making you familiarize, I will show a similar example and then I will talk more on that. Yeah. See, actually in our example, class is nothing but employee, correct? The class name is nothing but the employee. What are the variables in the class? 𝐸𝑛𝐽, 𝐸𝐻, 𝐸package. What is the method in the class? Employee details, employee details. So outside the class, what I have to do? I have to create object. Employee1 equal to employee. Object equal to class name. That is a syntax to create object, right? So what is the object name here? Employee1. What is the class name? Employee. So create object or object creation. What is the object created by me? Employee1. Then access. Then that means what? Call or use. Employee1.envo 1001. Employee1.eh 34. Employee1.epackage 9.8. Employee1.employee details. Then this body is executed. Employee details is printed. Hash is printed for 30 times. The employee number is 1001. Employee age is 34. Employee package is 9.8. Fine. So the same thing, right? I had taken a class with 3 variables and 1 function. I came out of the class, I had created object and called all these variables and functions. That's it. So now we will talk more on this. Actually, I told that if I want to use the variables and methods of a class, then I have to create object for the class. If I want to use the variables and methods of a class, I have to create an object for the class. So what will happen? What will happen if we create object for the class? So see, let's consider this part. Yes, fine. So when I create object for the class, what is going to happen? So this employee1 is the object that I had created for the employee class, correct? See, 2 things will happen once we create object for the class. First is the object will occupy some memory. The object will occupy some memory. See, for which class you had created this object, a copy of variables and methods of that class will be loaded into the object. See, object is like a magnet. Variables and methods are like pins. Pins will come towards the magnet, right? In the same way, employee1 is the object we had created. Employee1 is the object of which class? Employee class. So when we create object for the class, then a copy of variables and methods of that class will be loaded into the object. 𝐸𝑛𝐽 equal to 1001, 𝐸𝐻 equal to 34, 𝐸package is 9.8. It's 9.8. So employee details body, the entire body will also be loaded. See, this is what that is going to happen when we create object. When we create object for the class, that object will occupy some memory and a copy of variables and methods of the class will be loaded into the object. Copy of variables and methods of the class will be loaded into that object. Fine. Now you will feel something meaningful here. See, we had created an object for the employee1 class. So 𝐸𝑛𝐽, 𝐸𝐻, 𝐸package, employee details, everything is loaded into the employee1 object. Fine. Now see, you are asking like this: employee1.envo. That means from the employee1 object, you are asking to get envo value. That is what? 1001. Employee1.eh. In the employee1 object, what is ES value? 34. So 34 will come. In the employee1 object, what is ePackage value? 9.8. So 9.8 will come. Employee1.employee details. In the employee1 object, execute the employee details body. That is what you're saying. So again, I'm telling, when we create object for the class, a copy of variables and functions of the class will be loaded into the object. Now object.variable name, that is the syntax, right? So what you are doing, from the employee1 class, get envo value, that is from the employee1 object, get envo value, that is 1001. From employee1 object, get EVH value, that is 34. From the employee1 object, get ePackage value, that is nothing but 9.8. Employee1 dot employee details, execute the employee details body in the employee1 object. Fine. So that is what the point. What will happen? So here is the final thing which I had written. As soon as we create object for the class, that object will occupy some memory, and for which class we are creating the object. A copy of variables and methods of that class will be loaded into that object. Object is a magnet. Variables, methods of the class are pins. Fine. So now a very important point. What is this self? Why we have to put this self? So again, if we go back to the concept called as functions in Python, so let's consider that actually I am creating a function called as data, and I am writing some body here. I'm writing some body here. I am calling the data function like this. I'm calling the data function like this. See, I am going to get an error here. I am going to get an error here. So what is the reason for the error? See, if I pass a parameter, then I have to take an argument to hold it. Correct? If I pass a parameter, then I have to take an argument to hold it. So I am passing 2, right? Then if I don't take anything to hold that 2, then definitely I am going to get an error. So I have to take an argument to hold that. So now 2 is stored into which variable or which argument? A. Correct? So what we will do is we will consider the same in the class. So class demo. Class is a collection of variables and functions. But in a class we can have only variables, only functions, variables and functions, anything. So in the demo class, I am taking only the function, not the variable for now. So I will write some body here. So in the demo class, I have a function called as data. We know that to call the function or to call the variable in a class, we have to create object for the class. We have to create object for the class. What is the syntax to create object? Object equal to class name. Object equal to class name. So D is the object that is created for the demo class. D is the object that is created for the demo class. Once the object is created, we can call the method by using that object. D.data. D.data. Object.method name. Correct? So what I am saying, I am creating an object for the demo class. Once the object is created, the syntax to call a method is what? Object.method name. So D.data. So what I had done, I had created a class with one function. To call it, I have created object and then I had called. So there is an error in this line also. There is an error in this line also. What is the problem here means this instruction will be converted like this. Python will convert your instruction like this. That means what? See, actually you are using the D object to call the function, right? To call the function in the class, we have to create object. What is going to happen? That calling object will be sent as a default parameter to the function. See, if you want to call the method inside the class, you have to create object for the class. You have to create object for the class. So then object.method name you are giving, right? With what object you are calling? That object is sent as a default parameter to the function. That means the data function is called with the D object. To store 2, you have to take an argument A, correct? In the same way, by default, the calling object will be sent to the function. So D will be sent to the data function. To hold that D, we have to take self. So yes, to store 2, I have to take an argument, right? That is nothing but A. Here also, when we call the function with an object, that object will be sent as a default parameter. So to hold that parameter, you have to take an argument self. This D is in self. Simply speaking, the calling object, who is calling this function? D. That D object will be into self. Who is calling this function? Which object is calling this function? That object will be there into self. Here also, let's apply the same thing. See how we are calling the employee details function. Object dot method name. Employee1 dot employee details. See what we are doing here. We are calling the employee details function with what object? With employee1. So by default, the calling object will be sent as a parameter to the function in the class. So employee details will be called with the employee1 object. That means the cursor will go to the employee details function with the employee1 object. To hold this employee1 object, we are taking self argument. Fine, you are calling employee details with the employee1 object. That object will by default sent as a parameter. To hold that, we are taking self. So in self, what is there? Employee1 is there. In self, employee1 is there. So employee details is printed, hash is printed for 30 times. See, the employee number is, what is self? Self is employee1 only. Just now employee1 is copied into self. So in employee1, what is ENO value? 1001. In employee1, what is EH value? 34. In employee1, what is ePackage value? 9.8. See, self is employee1. Again, in employee1 ENO value, in employee1 EH value, in employee1 ePackage value, you're asking. So that's why you're getting again 1001, 34 and 9.8. So I'm going to explain this again. To call a method in the class, you need to have object. So you are using employee1 object to create to call the method in the class. This object will be sent as a default parameter to the function. To hold that, you're taking self. See, if I pass to, I must take some argument to hold it, right? Correct? In the same way, what we are doing here, we are calling the method with some object. That object will be sent as a default parameter. To hold that object, we are taking self. So in self, what is there? Employee1. So again in employee1, what is ENO? 1001. In employee1, what is EH? 34. In employee1, what is ePackage? 9.8. So this is called as what? Object as argument. Object as argument. The object is sent as a default parameter, and to hold it, we are taking self. But why Python people are doing like this? Why they are sending the object as argument or object as a default parameter? See, the concept is very simple. Let's consider like this. Let's say I have to give a lot of chocolates to you all people. So I came to you and I had given the chocolate one. I went away. Again after 1 hour, I came to you and I had given chocolate 2. Again after 1 hour, I came to you, I had given chocolate 3. Again after 1 hour, I gave chocolate 4, went away. Again after 1 hour, I had came to you and I had given chocolate 5. But it is very difficult for me to come and go for these many times to give chocolates. So that's why what I had done, simple solution. I had purchased a chocolate box. I bought a chocolate box. Whatever the chocolates I want to give you, I am loading this box with all of those chocolates. I will give this box to you. Then what will happen? You will only be picking up the chocolate whichever you want. Instead of coming, giving one chocolate, going away, again coming, giving a chocolate, going away. So instead of that, what I am doing, I am purchasing a chocolate box. In that chocolate box, what all the chocolates that I have to give, I'm loading, and then directly I will give this box to you, so that my work will be reduced. You can pick up, you can take any chocolate from this box anytime, whenever you feel like it. In the same way, see, you have to consider the object as a chocolate box. Object is the chocolate box. All the variables are the chocolates. All the variables as chocolates. So what happened here? What I told us, when we create object for the class, all the variables and methods of the class will be loaded into the object. That means Python people are loading the data, loading the object with full of data. Correct? Python people are loading the object with full of data. Then what is happening? Like when we call a method, they're sending the object with fully loaded data to the function. See, this object employee1 is fully loaded with data, right? That fully loaded object is sent to the function so that the function can pick up any value from that, any variable for that. See, you are sending the chocolate box to the function so that the function can pick up any chocolate. In the same way, the same thing, the object is loaded with full of data. So the object with fully loaded data will be sent to the function so that that particular function can pick up any variable, any data it can pick up. So that is the point. Hope you are getting my point. So the object is already loaded with data. That object is sent to the function so that the function can use any variable from that. So in self, what is there? The calling object is there. Which object calls this function? That object will be loaded into self. So let's talk more. That means what? If we speak more deeply, every object will have some address, right? Let's say the address of the employee1 object is 1001. The address of the employee1 object is 1001. Even more strictly speaking, the object will not be sent. The address of the object will be sent to self so that this function can pick up any variable from that address. So what we are saying is the object is fully loaded with data. The address of the object will be sent to the function. That is, in self, the address of the object will be there. So this function can pick up any value from that particular address. But generally, we will say that the object will be sent to the function so that the function can pick up any value. So see, this is what about the self. To call a function inside the class, we must use an object. With what object we are calling the function, that object will be sent as a default parameter to the function. To hold that object, we are taking an argument self. Fine. So I am actually going to explain this entire program for one more time. Class is a collection of variables and functions. In the employee class, there are 3 variables and 1 function. I want to use the variables and functions of a class. If I want to use the variables and functions of a class, I have to create an object for the class. So employee1 is the object that is created for the employee class. Once the object is created, what will happen? A copy of variables and functions of the class will be loaded into that object. In the employee1 object, 𝐸𝐴, 𝐸H, 𝐸package, employee details, everything will be loaded into the object. So now employee1.envo, from the employee1 object get envo value, that is 1001. From the employee1 object get EH value, that is 34. From the employee1 object get 𝐸package value, that is 9.8. Employee1.employee details, that means what will happen? The calling object will be sent as a default parameter. So now the employee1 object is like fully loaded with data. This object will be sent as a parameter. To hold that employee1, we are taking self. So in employee1, what is envo value? Again 1001. In employee1, what is EH value? 34. In employee1, what is 𝐸package value? 9.8. So this is the concept. So in this way, the object-oriented programming will work in this in Python language. Like in this way, they will be implementing the classes and objects. Fine. So in this program, what we had done, we had stored the data of one particular entity, right, by using one object. Let's say I want to store the data of multiple employees. I want to store the data of multiple entities. Fine. So how can we do that? Let's say. So actually, what is the intention of this program? The intention of this program is to store the data of 3 employees and to display. So as usually, what I will do, I will take a class. I don't want any variables directly now. I will take only methods. So in the employee class, we had taken 2 functions or 2 methods, get data function and also the display function, get data and display. So I want to use these functions. Then what I have to do? I have to create object for the class. If I want to use the variables and methods of a class, I have to create object for the class. Object equal to class name. That is a syntax, right? E1 is the object that is created for the employee class. You know, once the object is created, A copy of variables and methods of the class will be loaded into the object. Correct? In the even object, get data, display both are available. So object dot method name, that is the syntax to call the method. Even dot get data. Even dot get data. See, we know that the calling object will be sent as a default parameter. Even is also sent as a default parameter to the get data function. So get data is called with even 101 sai manager 10,000. Get data is called with even. In self, what is there now? Even. In ID, what is there? 101. In name, what is there? sai. In job, what is there? Manager. In sal, what is there? 10,000. Correct? So even dot get data. The calling object will also go, right? So get data is called with what and what? Even 101, sai, manager, and 10,000. So you had taken the respective arguments in the get data function to hold them. That means in self even is there, in ID 101 is there, in name sai is there, in job manager is there, in sal 10,000 is there. Fine. So now what is the meaning of this? Self means what? Even, right? Self is even. So what you are asking, in the even object, self means even. In the even object, create a variable with the name ID and assign this ID value. In the even object, create a variable called as ID and assign this ID. What is the ID here received? 101. So in the even object, ID equal to 101 is taken. Self is again even, right? In the even object, create a variable name and assign this name argument. What is name? You had sent sai, right? So in even object, name equal to sai is created. In the even object, create a variable job and assign this job. So in the even object, job equal to manager is created. In the even object, create a variable sal and assign the sal argument. What is the sal argument that you had sent? 10,000. So you have initialized the even object successfully. In even, you are asking, see, it's very simple. Self is even, right? So in even object, create ID equal to 102, create name variable equal to sal, create job variable equal to manager, create sal variable equal to 10,000. So the first employee's information is stored. Now, after executing the function, the cursor will go to the next instruction written after the call. That is the concept, right? Once the definition is executed, cursor will go to the next instruction written after the call. Even dot display. So, you know, the calling object will be sent as a default parameter. Now, the display function is called with even. What is there into self? Even. So, in even, self is even now. In even, what is ID? 101. Just now we had taken. In even object, what is name value? Sai. In even object, what is job value? Manager. In even object, what is sal value? 10,000. So, what is /t? Tab space. We will execute this. So our data will be displayed with tab space. Now what we are doing, we are actually creating the E2 object. So to store the data of the second employee, I'm creating one more object here. Fine. So E2 is equal to employee. The same story. Once the object is created, copy of variables and methods of the class will be loaded into the object. So in the C2 object, get data and display functions are there. How can I call a method? Object.method name, E2.getData. Now the get data function is called. See the default or the default by default the object, the calling object will also be sent, right? E2.getData. That means what? The get data function is called with E2, 102, Anushka, programmer, and 1 lakh. So the get data is called with E2, 102, Anushka, programmer, and 1 lakh. So self means what? E2 now, correct? Self is E2. In E2 object, create ID variable and assign 102. See, in E2 object, create name variable and assign this name, that is Anushka. In E2 object, create job variable and assign this job, that is nothing but what? Programmer. In E2 object, create a variable sal and assign this sal, that is nothing but 1 lakh. After executing the function, the cursor will go to the next line. So this is the next line after the call, right? E2.display. Now the display function is called with E2. The calling object will be sent as a default parameter. Display function is called with E2. In self, what is there? E2 is there. In E2, what is ID value? 102. In E2, what is name value? Anushka. In E2, what is job value? Programmer. In E2, what is sal value? 1 lakh. Now what will happen? I want to store the data of third employee. So what I will do? I will create one more object. E3 equal to employee. Again the same thing. When the object is created, copy of variables and functions of the class will be loaded into the object. E3 dot get data. So again, the calling object E3 will be sent as a default parameter to the function. So the get data is called with E3 103 𝐴𝐾𝐿 doctor 2 lakh. So in self E3 is there, in ID 103 is there, in name 𝐴𝐾𝐿 is there, in job doctor is there, in sal 2 lakh is there. Self is E3 now, correct? In E3 object, create variable ID and assign 103. In E3 object, create name variable and assign this 𝐴𝐾𝐿. In E3 object, create job variable and assign this doctor argument. In E3 object, create a variable sal and assign this sal 2 lakh. So E3 object is initialized. So once the definition is executed, cursor will go to the next line written after the call, right? So E3 dot display. You are calling the display function with E3 now. So in self, what is there? E3 is there. So in E3, what is ID? 103. In E3, what is name? 𝐴𝐾𝐿. In E3, what is job? Doctor. In E3, what is sal? 2 lakh. So like this, what you had done, you had initialized or you had stored the data of 3 employees and displayed. So what we had discussed at the beginning of this session, class is a collection, class is like generalization. Generally, all the employees should have what and what that we will put in the class. All the employees should have what? Get data, display, just the functions. One object is going to represent one particular entity, correct? E1 object is representing only regarding Sai. E2 object is representing only regarding Anushka. E3 object is representing only regarding 𝐴𝐾𝐿. But class is going to represent generally regarding all the employees, correct? And why the object dot syntax is given? Why object dot variable name? See, let's say I don't put this self dot. Then what will happen? See, actually here into this in the ID 101K, you're asking to create ID variable and you're asking to assign this ID that is 101. So you're asking to create ID equal to 101. But ID equal to 101 should be created in which object? In E1 object, you want ID equal to 101. In E2 object, you want ID equal to 101. In E3 object, you want to give ID as 101. You have to tell, right, in which object you are asking to put ID as 101. So that's why self dot is important. In self, if E1 is there, then in E1 object, you're asking to put ID as 101. In self, if E2 is there, then in E2 object ID equal to 101 you're asking to put. In self, if E3 is there, then in E3 object you are asking to put ID equal to 101. Self dot means what? Self is referring to the object. In which object or in which copy you want to put ID as 101, that you have to mention. Fine. So yes, in this way, what we can do is we can store the data of multiple entities using multiple objects, and we can generally represent regarding all the entities in the class. Fine. And again, if you are aware of functions, one important point is there here. Actually, in Python, we can write the functions without classes. Correct? We can write the functions without classes. Even we can write the functions inside the classes. Just in today's class, how we had done, we can write the functions inside the classes. Actually, in the procedure-oriented languages, like C, we can write the functions. We have to write the functions without classes. Correct? Actually, in the procedure-oriented languages like C language, there is no concept of class. We have to write the functions without classes. We have to write the functions alone. Correct? In the object-oriented programming languages like Java or .NET, we have to write the function inside the class only. In procedure-oriented languages, we have to write the functions alone without classes. In object-oriented languages, we have to write the functions inside the class only. In Python, both are possible. Yes or no? We can write the functions alone without class-oriented the functions inside the class, like object-oriented languages. We can call Python as both procedure and object-oriented. Because like procedure-oriented languages, we can write the functions without classes. Like object-oriented languages, we can write the functions inside the classes in Python. So we can call Python as both procedure and object-oriented language because of this reason. So Python is going to support the procedure-oriented principles along with the object-oriented principles. Fine. Yeah. So this is some description or some basic idea regarding the classes, objects, what is object-oriented programming. So what we had discussed in this webinar is like in the object-oriented programming, the task to be done is divided into subtasks, and every subtask is called as a class. So like what is the relation between Python and procedure, what is the relation between Python and object-oriented programming means basically Python is an object-oriented language. How can we decide whether a language is object-oriented or not means in any language, if we write the code using classes and objects, then we can call that language as object-oriented. In Python also we can write the code using classes and objects, so we can call Python also an object-oriented language. So class is a collection of variables and functions. Generally, all the entities should have what and what that is represented in a class. And one object is going to represent one particular entity. So like if we have to store the data of 5 mobiles, then 5 objects are required. One object can store the data of one particular mobile. But generally, all the mobiles should have what and what that we will mention in the class. So yes, hope you had enjoyed this webinar. So you got some basic idea on the classes and objects. Fine. So if anyone wants to take the full Python course along with the web development in Python, please contact the Scholar IT team. Thank you. Thank you all for joining the webinar. Bye-bye.